Good now, everybody, and welcome to the Rise Up Morning Show. It's your place for helpful Web3 news, commentary, and, of course, answers to your crypto questions. I am here with my special guest, Lucy the dog, in beautiful Midland, Michigan, to talk to you today. We're going to be joined, of course, by our good friend, Mr. Alex Popovich, in just a minute, and we'll get things started. If you've got a crypto question, if you're trying to learn about blockchain, this is the place to be. TikTok is a hard place to learn. Crypto is difficult to learn because it is overwhelming. There is a lack of helpful information. So what we want to do here is give you a place where you can ask any question. No such thing as a dumb question here. To help you get up to speed. The best way to learn anything is to join a community. And we're here live Monday through Thursday at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time to help you get up to speed. So let us know where you're tuning in from. If you're one of our regular friends, say hi. And then how we can help you today. We just got the FOMC numbers yesterday. I'm sure folks will want to hear about that. I heard a fantastic conversation about the future of the SEC depending on who wins the U.S. election. But, excuse me, of course, if you're joining from somewhere else in the world, let us know that too. And we can talk about what's happening near you. How you guys doing this morning? This is the garden at Grammy and Gramps' house. This will be my last stream here. The show is not sponsored by Grammy and Gramps in Midland, Michigan, but it could be. No, it couldn't be. We're not taking sponsorship money from our grandparents. Usually I'm live from Memphis, but it's great to be here with you today. From Australia, from the United Kingdom, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm so glad to hear it. I'm so glad to hear it. There's John. Yeah, we get to be here in Michigan a couple times a year. I like to come up and help my grandparents with stuff around their yard. They've got this big yard. There's a creek, and there are, a bunch of wooded areas back there, and so it's a lot to maintain. But boy, it's a beautiful place if you've got a morning show, or you've got a dog, or you've got some coffee that you want to hang out. This is the place to do it. So while you can't be here with me in person, I'm glad that you can be here to join me for the show today. Great place to hang out and talk about crypto, to, as they say, touch grass. Yes, indeed, Will. There's Lucy. Let me get him up here. Speaking of dogs, the dog meister himself has joined the chat. Welcome. How you doing, man?
What's up?
Good to see.
Oh,
There we are. I think I just jumped, but I got you.
yep.
Rise and shine. There's Lucy. Here comes Will. Look at that. We'll have a full show. Great. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Hello.
I'll let him get on in here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Will.
Dog.
How's it going?
Lucy. Lucy. Show me. I want to see.
Oh, she can't. Where she is, she can't hear you.
No, I got more
She's in her happy place.
I got that foot action in here. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Was I giving you the foot?
Damn. Let me see those piggy toes.
You got to subscribe for that.
Not free, baby. How you guys doing?
The dogs and the dogs. We're doing good. This is my last stream from the garden, so we're enjoying it as much as we can. This is the place to do a morning show, man. Out in nature.
Get your angelic Jesus vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like
I don't know what's.
And then,
go ahead.
and in the future, you can have the green screen behind you, and then it's just like heaven, and then you have like a white robe on, and you just come out, and then we'll rebrand you as like Crypto Jesus. We'll make a meme coin. It's gonna be great.
I thought about it once upon a time, rebranding that way to a more crypto-focused handle, but I decided no, it wasn't the play. Although I do on occasion, I have a disdasha that a friend of mine gifted me, which is like something you would wear if you were a man where Jesus lived. And I occasionally will put it on with like a scarf, and I will do videos as White Jesus offering commentary when people have particularly wild takes about Jesus that Jesus, the man, probably would have disagreed with. It's one of my favorite things to do. I like to say, hello, it is me, white Jesus. So I don't know what's going on today, except I know we got FOMC numbers yesterday. I was telling folks I heard a really interesting conversation about the future of the SEC based on the outcome of the election. But those are the only two news items I really know about. I don't know if you guys have other ones. I wanted to ask, how was the rest of your conversation with CJ yesterday? I've never had the chance to talk to him, but I've always enjoyed his videos.
Yeah, I'd seen one or two of his videos before, but it wasn't until I had a chance to kind of meet him at Nashville. DeFi Daddy set up the conversation. I met him at the Nakamoto stage, which is the main stage, and DeFi Daddy showed up, and then he brought in CJ and Crypto Kathy also, so I met her, and they're both lovely. I had a great conversation with the two of them, and then I started chatting with CJ, and I found out that he is familiar with Warhammer 40K, and I was like, I will do everything I possibly can to support you. Even though he's got more followers than me, but you know, I was like, I immediately like you. You are a nerd. We will be friends. And then without him knowing, I just grabbed his shirt and went, you're my friend now. And he went, ah. And that was it. But the conversation was good. It was fun. It was nice having a conversation with DeFi Daddy Nathan. For those of you who don't know his actual name. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway I had from that conversation of like new information was it was actually DeFi Daddy talking about how the summertime is the time where the stock market and crypto has its biggest not detachment, but like, you know, like they do the opposite of one another. They aren't hand in hand. So I asked how that conversation came up. As I asked him, I was like, hey, you're bullish on the stock market and you think crypto is going to catch up to it right now. Like, what are your thoughts on the fact that S&P 500 and NASDAQ have been making all-time highs and Bitcoin's been going down and sideways right now? What do you have to say about that? And he's like, historically looking, the summertime is the time where that kind of stuff happens. Once the summertime ends, they're going to get back in pair again, and Bitcoin should really catch up. He's like, for whatever reason, summertime they just do the opposite. And I was like, I'd have to look into the charts, you know, and check the data. But the thing is, Nathan's a numbers guy, so I have a tendency to believe him right, you know, out the gate. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's fascinating. And we saw another example of that happen yesterday with us getting a red day for Bitcoin, but green day for the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 off of the very good things that Jerome Powell had to say yesterday.
Yeah, so you're bullish.
Oh, yeah. I just made a video, and I was a little bit more mean in it than I should have been. Not that I was mean at all, I would say, on like the mean gauge, but like I was just being like, are crypto investors idiots? I mean, like we are, but like we got really good news and the S&P 500 goes up and the NASDAQ goes up. It's either the majority of us are super dumb and bad traders, which, I mean, you know, or we're in a highly manipulated market of people trying to manipulate Bitcoin to remain as cheap as possible for BlackRock and the like, to scoop up as much as they can before you can't stop this train. Or it's a combination of the two. And I'm more so leaning into the camp of manipulation being the bigger prime factor, but also, you know.
So,
you know.
there's a thing that I forget who it was. Some bigwig was on Twitter talking yesterday about the state of Bitcoin and it being a bearish day kind of thing, and wondering why. Same exact line of questioning that Will was just going down, and I'm just like, it was one of the working theories is that Bitcoin actually had a bit of a struggle for a couple other reasons. One, the whole Iran thing. And two, because Trump bombed yesterday and had a terrible day campaign-wise. What, Will?
What happened with Trump's campaign yesterday? Oh, was it the Kamala numbers?
Nope. It's the fact that he did a talking panel with the National Association of Black Journalists, and it went about as poorly as you can imagine.
Immediately, you didn't even have to say how it went. I immediately just went,
Nope.
"Oh no!"
Yeah, somebody. So
Oh,
anyway, but
how many times did he say the N word? No, damn it! He thought he was going to come off as cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
so no, but so here, bear with me because here's the line of thinking. Was that went really poorly for him. He is widely regarded inside of the crypto space, especially amongst the bigwigs, as being the Bitcoin president. And he was, until very recently, in the crypto community now. Detach my own opinions from all of this. In the crypto community, until very recently, he was widely regarded as the absolute frontrunner. That is being called into question.
Which I found to be wildly blinding to other things. But anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, exactly. And now the fate of Bitcoin is being tied to this man's campaign, which is so stupid.
That's so dumb.
Because Bitcoin has gotten where it has gotten without the help of the government, actually with negative help from the government, with amazing amounts of negative help from the US federal government. And so now to associate the two things at all is just so silly to me. I just can't fathom why we're attaching it to like one guy right now. A lot of the like narrative inside of the public facing sector of the crypto space has just shifted completely to be very sycophantic, and very gatekeepy and really tied to Trump's presidential campaign and his bid, which is just super dumb. And so I think combine that with Iran's the what's his name, Khamenei, the supreme leader, Ayatollah
Many, yeah.
Declaring that Iran will strike back after one of the main leaders of Hamas was assassinated in Tehran by Israel. So that's widely, that's another act of war. War makes markets crash, at least in the short term. Coupled with the fact that I guess, and I'm not the one to like report on all of the intricacies of everything that came out of the Fed meeting yesterday, but Will, I would leave that to you. I just assume that all those things kind of meeting is why we had the day with Bitcoin that we had yesterday. Although it seems to have been a relatively small dip.
Yeah,
it didn't really get hit that much. It's still above 64. So I don't know. I think that at least that's kind of what I've taken from the last 2 days.
There's a really good comment about how all these rationalizations that we attribute are really just lagging indicators. Like in real time, there may or may not be people watching Trump doing those things. There may or may not be people watching and reacting to the Iran news. There may or may not be people reacting to whales buying and selling, but a lot of what happens in the market is a lagging indicator to what is happening in the real world. Just because even though we have real-time information, not everybody has real-time information, and not everybody is acting rationally. There's a lot of interesting conversation that is beyond my economic ability. And, when I say economic ability, I realize it's kind of an oxymoron. I just mean people have theorized and justified and written and debated for a long time about like whether the markets are rational or not. And there are really interesting and compelling arguments in both directions. I personally tend to believe that they're not rational and that the indicators are lagging. You know what I mean? Like stuff happens all the time. And there is like a seasonality to it. The numbers tell a story that is undeniable. But I don't know. I always feel like speculating on, was it because so-and-so wore pink socks? There was a weird indicator someone told me about. I took an economics class in some, I don't know, distant life. And there was an index of, it wasn't sock color, it was tie color. And there's been this, what is it, when the Speaker of the House wears a certain color tie to a presidential whatever. Have you guys heard that figure? You know what I'm talking about?
I've heard it, but I'm not too familiar with it.
There's like it's kind of like the monkeys throwing darts at the S&P study where they're like, monkeys throwing darts do a better job at the stock market than you. There was a study of whether the Speaker of the House wore a certain color tie when the president gave a speech, how the economy would react. And it was apparently like a, an 80 or 90% correlate. It was ridiculously correlative to how well you could gamble based on this person's tie color if you knew what stocks to buy and sell. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. And I tend to think most of it is interesting to talk about, but I don't live my life that way just because it would drive me nuts. I would be watching the news all the time,
Well, one thing. One thing that I like about this conversation is it always comes down to just like how and who humans are at their core, which are emotional beings, and therefore markets are mostly irrational and emotional, not rational. It's the same thing in business too. Like, for those of you who may not know me too well, I have been in tech sales working for some of the largest companies in the world for 9 years now. And I can tell you that it's some of the most well-funded, well-staffed, well-resourced, most important companies in the world for global GDP. They make decisions off of emotion more than they make them off of like rationale. Now, for their business, they use AI models, and the AI models, they add, a lot more rationale to decisions. But like what they decide to buy, how they go and actually tackle their projects that create those systems, whether it's AI or procedural or operational or financial, those decisions are made by humans, and it's all emotions. If you can get the biggest sales I get is when I scare the shit out of people of if they don't use my product. I'm like, okay, guys, yeah, you can go use that other thing, but like, I got the phone number of this dude at this other company where like it all fell apart with them, and then that guy lost his job, and then they lost like 10% of stock share, and like, you should talk to him. Here's this phone number. And they're like, we will sign everything. You just gotta, like, it's emotions. It's emotions, and the people who you get into the room with, you have to get them to like you even if you have the best product. But that's getting out of the world of finance. But it's just highlighting that everything that's made in business, in the markets, once you move away from trading bots, because those are the only ones that are rational, highly, highly, highly emotional, even at the absolute top levels of play.
Mm-hmm. And there is a statistical element to it, like you point out with trading bots. Ron says in the comments, if you can totally remove emotion from it and get the best data, the most numbers, like you can absolutely write an algorithm that will be successful more often than it is not. But the average person looking at a chart or reading the news is not that algorithm. Absolutely emotional creatures.
If you get a little obnoxious, as is my specialty about that, and you think about it, is a bot that is trained on the movements, the ebbs and flows of market reactions to, react without emotion, just reacting to the manifestation of lots of different people's emotions that cause trends that the bot then learns off of. So the whole thing is really just emotion.
Yeah, because what data you put into an AI algorithm is the results that you get. So whatever, Alex. I'm just being before you pour it apart.
Yeah, right. This is like the movie Bicentennial Man. Did you guys ever see that movie with Robin Williams? That it was a terrible movie, but Robin Williams is just enjoying it. It's basically it. He's a robot who feels things and is irrational.
I like this comment from Ron. Even robots go wrong, and you can't leave them unaided. I just like the visualization of like leaving my robot alone and just hearing it breaking shit in the other room.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be a PSA in 2030. Is like, don't leave your robot unaided. It's 8 a.m. Do you know where your robot is?
That's me with my Roomba already. His name's Cody, and Cody's a monster. Cody loves to grab he loves to grab lamp cords and rip off the lamps and smash them on the ground. Fucking Cody. Yeah, I can't leave him alone. When he goes into a certain room, I have to watch him. I'm like, I should just be vacuuming. I should just get a vacuum at this point. I have to watch my robot.
Yeah, dude, my Roomba got permanently grounded after just being an absolute menace to society, menace to Chihuahuas, menace to society. So had to get put away.
I yell at Cody like he is a dog.
We had a really good comment a minute ago. I wanted to highlight something Alex has been doing, taking the lead on and just crushing it, has been reaching out to a bunch of our policymakers to try and get more folks on the show who are writing these legislations, who are talking to the SEC, who are talking to your presidential candidates, who are going to be around no matter who gets elected. And the comment is that it'll be great when crypto is a non-political issue. I heard somebody say the other day that not liking crypto is like not liking toasters or the internet. That we have rarely seen such a nonpartisan issue in terms of like how Congress ought to feel about it, yet
Yes.
such a divisive issue. So if that's how you guys feel too, like in the comments, you're like, oh my God, why do these politicians, the Democrats and the Republicans, when they learn more about it, when we can tell a better story about it, I very much think will understand that crypto it's a tool and it can be used for the betterment of our country, regardless of, what your particular platform or policy is. So stay tuned for that. This man is grinding. We're hoping to get some good conversations going with the people who represent us.
That did remind me one point I wanted to add on from Alex. He mentioned how like it's so dumb that like Bitcoin markets are tied to the Trump campaign, because government's never been our friend. So like, why should it be tied to a government or a political party? But that's another reason. The only way we get off of that is if Kamala Harris and the Democrats come out and say like, hey, we've done some studying, we've done some soul searching, aka BlackRock said it's time for us to start talking about this positively now, which is the truth. And then Kamala's be like, hey, we're going to do a 180. We were wrong. Here are our policies on crypto. Maybe it's equal to what Trump says he's going to do. Maybe it's a little bit less. Either way, something positive. And then the crypto markets will be like, oh, no matter who wins, we're going to get someone a little bit more friendly. And then the tide to the Trump campaign goes out the window, because then whoever wins, you got good things coming for Bitcoin.
Yes.
So that's the only way we get out of that, and that would be such a boon to our industry. And it astounds me how when I was at the Bitcoin conference, and Trump was there, so you had like some more like very 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 hardcore like Trump more so focused political people than financial, but there are still like crypto influencers who are immediately like bashing Kamala and like that she doesn't have a stance out yet. And like, guys, no, like no, what are you doing? Like, you care more about your political, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but like you clearly care more about your side winning than you care about Bitcoin winning, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with caring more about politics than caring more about Bitcoin. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's far more altruistic to care more about politics than it is to care about Bitcoin. But like, you just understand where your priorities lie. Like you care. You're knowingly spinning the story, or you're so blind by your political bias that you have now become a worse trader and a worse educator, which is what we're like almost everybody's trying to be, or at least positioning themselves to be, right? Because the best case scenario is Kamala comes out and says, we're going to support Bitcoin by doing XYZ and yada, yada, yada. And then the markets will be like, oh my fucking God. And no matter, and then people are going to come out and be like, oh, well, you can't trust her. I'm like, well, you can't trust Trump either. Like, I mean, like the dude, both their administrations, not Kamala's, but Biden's, both of them have attacked Bitcoin. So it's like, it's the same argument to either side, At that point, you have now become a political pundit trying to spin things to your side. You're just a branch for Fox News, or you're a branch for MSNBC, just without your affiliate ties to them. And you're not on Team Orange. You are, but you're not on Team Orange. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about Bitcoin, guys. I'm talking about Bitcoin Orange.
Wrong orange.
And that just astounds me, because I met so many people of that mindset at Nashville who were like very, very loud talking about it. And they're like, oh, you can't trust Kamala. And I'm like, you can't trust Trump. I'm like, what? Like, what? Guys, open your eyes more. Trust politicians less. They are manipulating you to believe certain things. They are not your friends. Oh, anyway.
Well, it's a good example of how the narrative hasn't caught up yet, because one of the stats I heard, and I haven't verified this research, but it came from a trustworthy source. I heard it on the Unchained podcast, so I believe it's probably close to true, if not true. The study cited was that 7% of registered U.S. voters hold crypto in excess of $1,000, which seemed wild to me. I don't know who the sample they were talking to was.
Yeah, that's the biggest sample I've ever heard.
but it's amazing. And I have heard other studies that say as many as 1 in 5 registered voters hold crypto in any amount, mostly Bitcoin. And increasingly, members of Congress do too, or they're at least familiar with it. They're becoming sort of crypto pilled as people like, French Hill or Ro Khanna or, Lummis and Emmer and so on and so forth are talking to their colleagues about this stuff. And also, as instruments like the ETFs get passed, I think it is going to become the only person in Washington who holds an unpopular opinion of crypto now. I mean, Chuck Schumer, who has voted against it for a long time, he voted against Biden on, I think it was the SAB vote. It was a significant recent crypto policy.
Yeah, it was the
SAB
I can't.
121.
Yeah, that's right. I can't think of a single politician or like Washingtonian who is like against crypto and it benefits them right now, except Gary Gensler. Like Gary Gensler is the only person for whom the no crypto has been a successful play. Everybody else who's doing that has either changed their minds or suffered backlash for it. Elizabeth Warren is in hot water, as an example. I just think it's a matter of time.
Warren, as you trigger me.
Right. Sorry, Will.
No,
Should have had a trigger warning.
Elizabeth Warren is a really, really, really good example of exactly what we were talking about earlier, and proof that the story matters. Because, for whatever reason, let's assume, I don't want to say the best or the worst. Let's just assume ops normal for a politician like Elizabeth Warren, someone who has picked a party identification and adopted its platform for whatever, and typically goes down party lines, but tries to be a little bit of a maverick, right? She's picked progressive. Being a publicly labeled progressive and also being anti-blockchain
Yeah.
is proof that these people have no clue what any of this is, and they've been grossly misled or just haven't been led anywhere. And
I think she's been led somewhere.
well, no, for sure. She is an anecdote. She's an example of the idea of progressives not being in support of blockchain making no sense. She is an anecdote in just that I'm sure she's bought and paid for, and believes whatever her handlers tell her to believe, which is the case for the overwhelming majority of people in Congress. So that's hyper unfortunate. But I think that a really interesting example of how this is a truly bipartisan issue, this is one of the things that I'm excited to talk to Dennis Porter about when we get him, is the fact that you can take a politician like Emmer and have him and Ro Khanna agree on something.
Yeah.
Because they are very far apart on everything else. And this particular issue of like blockchain technology and wanting to keep innovation and the tech jobs this can create, and the revenue and the economic boost in the United States is like, who on earth could be opposed to that if you are currently serving the government of the United States of America? And someone's like, hey, here's a cool piece of tech that can do X, Y, and Z. Do you want to keep it or pass it to the next guy? And right now, any politician that's like, yeah, double it, give it to the next country, is just either not paying attention or they have an ulterior motive. And it's really that simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the only way they're able to get away with it is a lack of acumen. That's why we're here. We're here hopefully helping everyday people get up to speed on, beyond the hype. Of course there are downfalls. Of course there are drawbacks. We absolutely need to address things like noise pollution, energy consumption, scalability, security, ease of use. We could go on about the myriad problems, but we also can tell a better story about what's good here.
Someone pointed out this Time magazine piece about the impact of Bitcoin farming, the mines.
Yes.
And I hadn't seen this. It's from earlier this month. I'll put a link to it. It appears to be a totally free to read article, so I'll throw it in the Discord. But at first glance, now granted, I haven't completely read this, but at first glance, this appears to be an example of a single isolated farm in Texas and how it has negatively impacted the surrounding area there. And so I think a couple things about this. Again, first impression, I will read the entire thing, just not right now because it's going to take a minute. It's really, really important to highlight the negative impacts of like things like this, farms like this, or just buildings in general, or just things in general to surrounding locale, like for people who live near them. I have been personally complaining about that for ages. I flew rescue missions during Hurricane Dorian, and I personally flew over hog farms in North Carolina. And let me tell you, this has absolutely nothing on hog farms in North Carolina, and I've never once seen a Times Magazine article about the cancer rate of families who live near hog farms in North Carolina, because it's like 98%. It's horrifying. When I tell you, you would be mind blown to see this thing in North Carolina and think, oh my God, is that really in the United States? Yes, it is. And it's very close to my house. So there's that. So this is great. We should be talking about this because these things do hurt people that live near them. And it's a great opportunity to see how can we clean this up, because there's so many great examples of Bitcoin mining being done, not only energy efficiently, but also to the benefit of the people living around it. For example, I forget, Evan, maybe you remember, I want to say it's in Vancouver. There's a relatively large Bitcoin mining operation in Vancouver, and they've managed to harness heat exhaust from all of the machines and route it, and it's pumped back into the building and several buildings surrounding, and it provides energy recycled heat to all of these buildings all winter.
I don't know that one.
I'll find the article. It was a good. It's from several years ago, so I don't know if the farm is still up and operational, but it certainly was. And that was a really interesting one. That was kind of around at the same time that Elon Musk was talking about the need for Bitcoin mining to reach a net energy efficiency standard of at least 50%. And if he did that, Tesla would start accepting Bitcoin as payment again. And not only have we met and exceeded that mark, but he also has not kept up his end of the bargain there. So, fun fact.
Quick update is both sides are correct. Says Bitfarm is all green energy there in Canada. And I would just add for people, the intellectual honesty is important. Mostly the companies that are reporting on this, in our experience, while it is important to tell that story, are not holding Google or OpenAI or even Tesla to the same standard that they are holding Bitcoin to, when it is, in many ways, scores of magnitude more efficient or becoming more efficient all the time than alternatives like the traditional money system. Alex, is it okay if I cut you off just to intro our friend? I don't know.
Of course, please.
I just wanted to say before you rot and pass away from waiting, we're so glad to have you here. If you don't know, I don't know, you might know, I don't know, as Pink Lady. I was surprised to learn it was you. So thank you so much for joining the show.
Yes, hello.
We welcome your thoughts, feedbacks, opinions, good jokes, words of wisdom on anything. Feel free to just interrupt us.
Let's not set the bar too high.
I know, right? But if there's something particular that you wanted to say, feel free.
Also, what is your profile picture? I'm trying to figure it out.
It's our cat.
A cat in a shirt?
It's a cat. Well, yes, a cat in a shirt. Our cat is very large, so it's funny to put clothes on him because he wears like a size 3T.
Oh, now I see the cat. Okay.
Most people don't realize like how big a cat has to be a size 3T.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a huge cat.
I have seen children that are smaller than that.
It was just like a leaf. I didn't see the cat. I didn't see the black cat.
No, and I may, if I move downstairs to my office, I may come on visually as well. But yes, my other account was banned, and you know what? Honestly, not a bad thing. So, hello.
Hello and welcome.
Well, it's good to see you. I haven't talked to you in forever, it feels like.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself more formally for people who haven't seen your content before, so they can get an idea of what you're interested in and what you do?
Absolutely. Good call. So my background is accounting. I have 2 degrees in accounting. I worked in business risk consulting for several years at a global management consulting firm. I am now a business owner and entrepreneur. So I'm interested in general in alternative investments, including but not limited to the crypto space. I am more interested in the crypto space from a transparency, trackability, auditability perspective than a short-term get-rich-quick perspective. And I, enjoy in general discussing like the intersection of public perception, policy, and regulation, and just basically in general things that impact kind of the financial reporting sector and the public sector. So high level.
Excellent.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Very interesting stuff. I love the background and your focus. We need more of that in the crypto space, for sure.
We definitely do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw
What's your
a
take
great
on some of
comment.
the conversation? Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw a great comment. Somebody mentioning a crypto exchange commission, and for a long time in the space when I was more active, on TikTok and discussing it, there was this huge push for like no regulation, no regulation, no regulation. I have always been pro responsible regulation. Part of that is because I was in the accounting space post Enron, post Arthur Anderson. And retail investors really can get wrecked because of a lack of transparency, and not like what is going on within a company is not publicly available. So I saw that note in here in the comments, and I'd love to know what you all think of that. But I'm a firm believer that stocks and the stock market is not like that. Exchange should not be regulating the crypto market because they are very, very different, and the type of regulation, the type of reporting, and even the type of accounting related to those companies is and should be very, very different.
Yeah, I'm not just like I don't know where to go with that. I have my opinion and I'll still share it, but like I don't know all of the ins and outs and details of the regulatory framework that covers everything in the stock market. And of course, like in the same sense that like the Howey test doesn't really work for securities in the crypto space, I would imagine the overwhelming majority of regulations in the stock market aren't going to also work for crypto companies because it's just different. But I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't know all the all the detailed information to figure out or really have a detailed opinion on which ones I think could fit the crypto market. But overall, with the crypto market, with the regulation that I want to see is pretty much just the US government saying like, hey, banks, if you want to hold or custody Bitcoin or crypto for your customers, you can. Stable coins, let's provide some regulatory framework around that to have some, public auditing, make sure that they're backed well, other things of just enabling USDC or other stable coins to be kind of used throughout the economy to further the strength of the dollar, but also to get more people on chain, which would be nice. And a few other things are just kind of like a regulatory framework of providing clarity around the ability for businesses in Web 2 to work with businesses in Web 3, and then just kind of like step back and just like see what happens. And when problems arise, because the problems will be similar but slightly different, I'm sure, as compared to traditional financial markets, then figuring out where things are breaking and applying fixes there. But I don't really have a detailed response. That's pretty much the only thing I can kind of add to the conversation for me in terms of what I want to see.
So I have a ton of thoughts. I just did a really long video that I have to edit and post, but it breaks down like what I would call the first like layer of things that we need to look at, which is the number of regulatory agencies that are able to have a hand in the crypto space with regards to law enforcement right now, just given the fact that we have very little consensus on classification standards for all of these different assets, which is the first giant problem that I would identify. You've got the CFTC, who looks at some of these things as commodities and handles them as such. You've got the SEC, who can't figure out what a security is, but just treats everything as if it is. Then you've got the IRS, which treats all of it as property. and currency at the same time for the purpose of getting as much tax revenue as possible. And then you've got FinCEN, who's just like, hey, all we know is there's money involved and we've got to do stuff. And none of them are having a really easy time. And I would argue that they've been handed a very hard to regulate thing with really no assistance. So the first thing that I think we would need to do is try to establish some sort of classification standard or a new kind of test that you can run these things through that I think really needs to involve the proposed utility for whatever asset is in question, because of course some of them are intended to function as a currency and just be a literal medium of exchange to translate value from point A to point B. Some of them have value that can be translated from point A to point B, but that's not the point. And so perhaps property or commodity would make more sense for some of those, but we don't have any sort of like multi-pronged test that we can apply to a new cryptocurrency or a new digital tokenized asset and walk away with some sort of idea of, okay, which agency should have a hand on this? Because we certainly don't need, take Bitcoin, for example, as the most prevalent. We certainly don't need the IRS, FinCEN, the CFTC, and the SEC all enforcing different kinds of policy and regulation on the same asset in 4 different ways without talking to each other. And the fact that we've left a little bit too much of that up to the agency is also a huge problem. The glaring example, which was recently kneecapped by the Supreme Court, thankfully, because it's insane and I can't believe this was legal. The SEC, if they want to go after somebody, they're allowed to conduct that. They were allowed to conduct that completely in-house. And we have this pesky little thing in this country called the Bill of Rights that people love to cherry pick out of. But one of the things in there is the right against self-incrimination. And the SEC has been operating for a long time under the legal ability to infer guilt from silence, which is unconstitutional. However, they did that a lot. And so what you would have is a mechanism wherein a crypto-focused entity or company would want regulatory clarity. Gemini is a phenomenal example of this. The Gemini exchange in New York, either founded by, whatever, the Winklevi, trying to get some sort of clarity, the SEC asking them really targeted, incriminating questions, them not wanting to step into hot water and basically saying like, well, hey, I don't have enough information to even answer that question. The SEC saying, you don't want to answer? Guilty. We're going to sue you now. And then anyone targeted by an SEC investigation not being entitled to a jury trial, but rather only being subject to an in-house SEC-led investigation of SEC claims where they are allowed to infer guilt through silence. It's a horribly slanted enforcement process that really just means that whoever is chairing that thing just gets to, invoke their will whenever they want. And that's horrible. So that was a very long answer of me saying that agencies need to be addressed first and given some sort of process by which we start classifying digital assets. But in the meantime, last thing, in the meantime, there are a few very obvious crimes that we could all agree on being crimes because they just fall into fraud, theft, larceny, whatever. And we're just not enforcing laws around any of those. We're going after large-scale industry relevant entities, Uniswap, big companies, things we don't understand really, and trying to enforce laws that make no sense on them while we're just letting a shitload of essentially petty criminals just run rampant and steal shit from people with almost no fear of repercussion. And TikTokers launching their own meme coins is a perfect example of exactly that. Those people think they have absolutely no chance of being held accountable, so much so that they won't even Google what laws they're breaking. So, Andrew.
So I do
Good
want
mic
to just
drop.
and I'm gonna share this and then I'm gonna drop off and come back on because I'm in my office now, so you can look at me and see I'm a real person. I think Alex and Evan know I'm real, but we haven't met yet. I do want to just kind of going back, and this is just more of a clarifying so that people understand, like you mentioned kind of the IRS, the SEC, treating these things differently. And that is actually something that we see universally across all forms of business. And that is why, like, an insurance company is going to prepare GAAP financials. They're going to prepare a yellow book financials for the insurance regulators, and then they're going to prepare IRS tax financials. And those are actually three different forms of accounting. And then if they're publicly traded, they're going to take those GAAP financials and they're going to use their GAAP financials to prepare SEC filing financials. So that is another form of accounting. And those different forms, you're actually going to end up with different calculations for income. You're going to end up with different calculations for EBITDA. You're going to end up with different calculations for your reserves, depending on the type of rules you're following, because these regulatory agencies do assess how you account for things differently. And I just want to add that information because it's not unusual. I firmly agree with Alex with your point on there isn't a strong understanding of the space. And what I do see, interestingly enough, is every single major, like, national CPE that I go to or am involved in, with Deloitte, with McKinsey, with some of the large law firms, they have a conversation on crypto. The academics, like the people who are putting together the financials, the lawyers, they are working on marijuana and crypto extensively to come up with ideas to kind of solve these things, because it's a totally new class and we have to think about it in a very, very different way. So this is not me disagreeing. This is just me adding context that we have a lot of industries that are regulated by different bodies using different metrics. And that is very, very normal in our current environment. And I'm just going to quickly drop back off and come back on.
Sounds good. Thank you. I will look forward to seeing your face in a minute. I'll watch for your request. The other thing I think that I would add some, like, as context to, I think one of the things that makes crypto specifically difficult is that it is an entirely new medium, and most of the use cases are emergent. Like, using crypto to speculate on a financial asset as an instrument for a stock, for a commodity, is a somewhat familiar thing to us. Because it looks like that, we are tempted to regulate it like that, but we can't forget that it has very inherently different properties, like the nature of having something on chain, the transparency, the accountability, the immutability, the modularity, how easy it is for people to have a permanent record that anyone can access, that can't be siloed or gate kept, is very different than the nature of the way we do things now. I personally believe that any kind of policy or regulation, one of the reasons it'd be important to have somebody like Alex in front of the Congress people is because we need them to understand that this is more than just dollars and cents. And that probably your health records will be tracked this way. That not just stocks, not just bonds, but most kinds of information that people need to access, I believe, will be tokenized someday. It seems inevitable, the way that most of our communication happens with language and words. It is the vehicle we have found that is the most innovative way to frictionlessly make meaning about things between ourselves. It's gonna do that for all those things. And so I feel like any kind of regulation needs to have an eye on that eventual future where we are going. Otherwise, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't have a good analogy, maybe one of you guys does, but like the idea that like where we're going is a tokenized future. And so we need to have regulations that will help us get there, whether we're talking about stocks or trading cards or medical records or energy bills. Like, the infrastructure needs to work for all those things, or work so that we can make all those things work in the future. Otherwise, it's going to be painful. It's already painful right now. like you said about meme coins, I think regulations as they stand are actually contributing to the kind of rise in memes that we see, the unhelpful rise. It is harder if you are a founder trying to launch a startup, like Tornado Cash is a great example. If you code something that other people are using to do illegal stuff, you will be held accountable and prosecuted for it. Meanwhile, the meme coin market manipulators are just running rampant. There was a really great tweet a couple years ago that said, crypto founders talking to the SEC, don't worry, my token has utility. And then they did a repost of it this year and it said, don't worry, my token doesn't have utility. So right now, the regulations we have, they mostly, I think, are helping the least valuable use cases. It's something that I don't know how we start to solve, but that was my 2 cents. And I don't know, Pink Lady, if you heard me say that, but my takeaway is the regulation we have needs to have an eye on the future where not just financial assets, but many kinds of information will be tokenized and should help us move to that eventual kind of future.
Yeah, and I really liked what you said about medical records because
Totally.
So I guess to add on to my intro, I was heavily in the healthcare space when I was in with consulting. The need for us to have an indelible record across healthcare and to regulate it, as such with, limiting access to outside individuals, maintaining privacy, but also having a record of accountability, that's going to be really unpopular with large healthcare companies. It's not about physicians. It's not about providers. It's about the large conglomerates who are profiting off of providers, and they do not want a record that cannot be erased. But for patients, for individuals, the ability to have your medical records accessible, auditable, transparent, and unchangeable, that will change the quality of services, because that level of accountability and auditability and transparency will require another level of conscious care from large companies. So yeah, Evan, I love that example.
I want to add one last thing that I don't think people realize. A lot of people bring up the caveat. They say, yes, but a public blockchain will not be good for that because I don't want people to see my medical records. And I want to clarify for folks who are concerned, rightly so, about that this will also add a layer of consent that is missing from our current medical, or generally speaking, record-keeping system. We have the technology with roll-ups or ZK proofs, which we can talk about if people are unsure of what that is. It's basically a way to verify something without needing to observe it directly. Right now, your medical records are kept mostly on paper, mostly in filing cabinets at every doctor you visited in the last, 20 years, however long they have to keep it. If somebody breaks in, if there's a fire, there's all kinds of lack of consent going on for how long they have access to your data and often how they use it, largely without your permission. And that extends everywhere. Facebook's terms and conditions, they're brutal. They are using your data for all kinds of things. Their business model depends on it, and they are incentivized to continue leveraging your consent to use your data in all kinds of ways that benefit mostly them. But blockchain, the technologies that make cryptocurrency possible, will also make it possible for you to grant and revoke permission with more certainty and control. So that if you don't want someone to see your medical record, or you only want them to see it for a week, or only as needed, or you want to approve every time they have to look at it, you will have the flexibility and freedom to do that. And that's going to be huge. And that's blockchain too.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I've worked with healthcare providers for years, one of which actually is the Canadian government, who has been for the past 4 years working to build their own blockchain to combine medical records across, and it's a private blockchain. That's the thing. It's like, I don't know if the regulatory framework of the healthcare space will ever allow a public blockchain. It will always have to be private from a regulatory framework standpoint in order to work. And it's only going to work, in my opinion, so this is a little bit of pushback on you, Evan, but I agree with everything you said. It'd be great. If you can have control over who gets access and you can open it up and close it, but still have it be a public blockchain in some way and not have it be your IP, like your personally identifiable information, your PI, I should say. That'd be great. I don't know if I know of a solution who does that, but I haven't explored a lot of the hybrid blockchains, hybrid being both public and private. But private blockchains, yes, can absolutely be adopted and useful, incredibly so, for national level healthcare environments. Private healthcare environments, that won't fly in the US, but we do have the Affordable Health Care Act, and I'm sure over time that'll get expanded and stuff like that. Maybe you could do that in the States, but in Canada, you absolutely could, because in Canada, it wasn't if you went to one hospital to another within the same province, doctor was able to pull up your medical record for the government, but it was still tied to the province. So if you went from one province to another province, they couldn't get your past medical record. So if you came in unconscious, let's say from an accident, they couldn't get access to all of your medical information, even though it's a national level healthcare system. And so that's what they were trying to do with the blockchain. Because the reason why was like different provinces did slightly different things and they needed their different systems. I forget the exact reason. But having a private blockchain across all of them, it was the reason why they were building it, to unite all of those systems, so that you could, a doctor in Ontario could pull up the record of somebody who got injured or had to come into the hospital of someone who lives in British Columbia. And they could pull it up and they could see their entire history and then know immediately, like, oh, okay, based off of this, like, cool, they can't have this, we need to do X, Y, Z, here's the thing that can be a complication for the service that we're about to provide, all that kind of stuff. And the biggest reason why they were doing it also is to also be able to have the data to analyze into their alerting system for sepsis detection. Sepsis detection is the #1 reason why people die in hospitals. It's an infection of sorts, right? And if you don't have like the total history of the patient, you have a higher chance of there being issues and people passing away and surgeries not being as successful as they should. But that's just the thing. I don't know, as you said, I'm sorry, I forget your real name. I think
Jessica. I don't think I gave my real name other than Pink Lady. There's just been a whole bunch of,
Yeah. But you're totally right. Like everything about the patient, having that a holistic patient, like basically digital ID, amazing for the patient, fantastic for the caregiver, fantastic for the team supporting them, all that stuff. Companies, though, some problems there, particularly if it's public. If it's private, they're fine. If it's public, yeah, I don't know about that. But I liked the distinction between the two.
If we're talking about regulation, I think that's one of the areas where this will lag, but needs to keep up. I think there's a real possibility that as consumers come to experience these benefits or become aware that they could exist, that they may come to demand them, and some company somewhere will offer them. Lobbyers and legislators will get behind them because they see that these are popular things that will help them get elected. And then eventually policy will change, would be my hope. That this would be a place where regulation right now is not that helpful, but where it could be more helpful because, it's not very different in the U.S. in terms of there are a lot of siloed systems where they each have different rules and regulations about who can see what, when they can see it to manage patient care. But I think as people become more educated, I think most people would nod their heads yes, that I would like permission over my stuff. I would like to have better care. I would like to have more control and consent. I think as people become more educated, they will expect those things and come to demand them increasingly. And if they have enough power, can enact a change, I would hope.
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of that with like the GDPR movements in Europe. And I do wish that the American public had a better understanding of what data privacy entails and the protections there, because like the Facebook comment, we have so blindly shared data for so long that and I think sometimes the conversation gets stuck on this regulatory. That's funny. Crypto Never Sleeps just says, where's Chief Geek? Chief Geek is like my favorite person to talk to about this. But you have, publicly traded companies who complain about GDPR because of the requirements and yet comply with it in Europe because they have to. And, their understanding of just how valuable that data is on another level. And, I think that's really where like the education, the conversation is important, is the people. And Evan, to your point, people demanding different things. I think, unfortunately, in the healthcare space, we exist in a system in which people cannot make demands because of the way the system is set up. But I am hopeful that in other spaces that could be true, or that we will have changes within the healthcare space that will allow people to demand these types of things.
Yeah. And I think we need models for it. Like, until people see a model for how it's, I just had a conversation with a company called Ixtari that's using like Chainlink's foundation to offer this kind of like encrypted data that you can consent to sharing or revoke access to with a simple user interface in many different arenas. They're starting with places where it's like highly regulated industries, finance, etc., to work with regulators to offer one way to do it differently that consumers will get to touch and hopefully start to taste, it's a taste test. And until we get stuff like that, people are going to say, what is it? You know what I mean? Like, we can sit here and explain it all day with our acronyms. I think that point of inflection will come when people, they get to see it, they get to try it, they get to touch it. Like a Coinbase smart wallet, when they get to send money with crypto and they don't realize what they're doing, and then they learn, oh, that's crypto, So again, to regulation, we've got to have regulation that allows people to build those kind of helpful models and doesn't punish them for trying or discourage them from starting before they even sit down to code a line.
Someone left a comment just about like the state of this kind of stuff in places like Europe versus the United States. And I just think it's worth noting too that a lot of this is not really arguable. It's correct. There are things in place. There are mechanisms in place in the United States that would prevent us from passing a law that just says this, that, this, without changing the thing that prevents it in the first place. Will, to your point, we'd run into so much red tape trying to, smart contractize pieces of people's healthcare records or the whole records or whatever. There's all sorts of things. A giant misconception, especially in the United States, and I think it's just based on the categorical inefficiency of Congress as a machine, is just that, that means we're screwed. You can change anything you want. Like, the Constitution itself is a living document. You can change it. The problem is that we just haven't in our lifetime really seen examples of that working well. One of the things that I would go out on a limb and say was like a great idea that just massively failed on execution because it wasn't thought all the way out was this Trumpian idea of removing regulation. Great. Okay, sure. We have too many rules that just complicates things and makes it hard to maneuver and experiment and innovate because you're just always running into some sort of wall. But if you don't have a plan to replace that after you pull it all away, then the dumpster's just going to catch on fire.
Yeah.
That's really, I think, where we would need to start. Like, forget for a minute what existing policy would prevent X, Y, Z from happening, and just come up with an ideal utopian scenario where we could pass a law or build a regulatory agency or whatever we want to do that does this and enables us to do this. And if we could all agree, hypothetically, that this, whatever this is something that we want, then you walk backwards and figure out what all of the hurdles are and work on changing them. And the best part is that the whole thing is fluid. So if we realize in a year or two that like, shit, this had an unintended consequence, you can still fix that. Like, we are so commonly kept from making moves that we just label as radical or crazy because of existing institutions in our government that we won't ever even try something new. which is a real big bummer. You know, nothing has to be set in stone, but based on how slow and inefficient Congress is, it's given that idea, which is really unfortunate. And I think that's one of the things that's really keeping helpful crypto regulation from being able to come out, just because there's so much red tape and we're not willing to address the problems with the red tape, or even just set it aside to just have a conversation about, well, in a perfect world, what would we do? What would that policy look like? Okay, what red tape do we need to look at and address? What's possibly keeping us from being able to advance this way, or this technology in a helpful way? And that's a bummer. But there's a lot of countries that don't work like that. That just like, hey, here's this thing that is a really great opportunity for our people. Let's figure out a way to make it happen. Instead, over here, we're too busy arguing about dumb shit that doesn't matter. Problem.
Yeah. Rip.
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 Indeed.
Yeah, we really need, the whole system needs to change, and I think that's where my comment before I came on, was rooted in, yes, we can tell the story, yes, we can convince these individual lawmakers, and there are some, Rokana, there are some who have been instrumental in even internet regulations and kind of providing that sandbox to innovate. In the past, it's the body itself and the system itself that is then preventing. We have things that are, popular well above a supermajority that are not passing because of the way we've failed to evolve in the system. And I think that is a critical piece for the continued innovation and output, at least out of the US, because it's going to happen somewhere, and it's not going to be here if things continue the way they are.
So
Yeah,
I will.
and honestly, I don't think they're going to let it. Go ahead, Will. That was my point.
I want to give a slight counterpoint to all of this.
Please.
And I very much so like, from a security standpoint of our democracy and protection of the majority as well as protection of the minority, that the system moves slow. I think the system moving slow is broad stroke, not in every case, good for our democracy. The reason why I think it adds security, even though it's frustrating, right? Like, we're humans, our timeline is short. We want things to happen fast. We want to be able to open up the doors for business quickly in industry, to make sure that we are the ones who are building and leading in the space of crypto, right? We want things to move quickly. But I like that our system actually moves slowly, because it prevents a tyranny of a tyrannical power or a very consolidated group of elite people, like very small within the already elite people, from pushing forward policy super quickly without the ability for it to be stopped or discussed and debated, and giving time for the American people to know about it. And that's what's happened with crypto largely, amongst a whole host of other topics. It enables the ability for people to have enough time to be able to start to formulate an opinion and educate themselves, as well as it slows down a tyrannical minority from pushing out policy that can suppress the majority and elevate them. And that's across a whole bunch of other things. And yes, it is a problem. Yes, it is annoying. Yes, democracy is slow, particularly in a large country like ours. But our systems of checks and balances is frustrating, but ultimately protects us.
But we've seen, especially in recent times, like under Mitch McConnell's Senate, way too many examples of it not being a question of something moving slowly, but a question of something not being allowed to move because of a single piece of red tape. And that's my issue. Like, there's a huge difference between slow move and stagnation.
Yes.
And if you take a policy or a bill or something that ends up getting full House support and passage, and it goes to the Senate and Mitch McConnell wipes his ass with it, then none of the checks and balances matter, because that single stopping point is allowed to bottleneck everything. And then we just let it sit there in place for years regardless of how many pieces of legitimate legislation that should have been allowed to have their time in the sun and get voted on, not even allowed to be considered because of one guy. So I completely agree that checks and balances are needed. We have a gigantic country. We have shitloads of people. You would not want and there's a practice in place for something that is like, this needs to happen right the fuck now, and here's what you can do: executive order, right? Like, that's a thing, and there's checks and balances around how that can work as well. But we are just way too comfortable with bottlenecks with no way to get around them. And
Totally agree with that.
that's a huge problem.
That's
a huge problem.
I totally agree with that. And the point that I made is like, overall, I like our system and how it slows things down, but you want to slow things down, not stop them. So I agree with you. I just wanted to give the counterpoint.
It's a good point, because you're totally right. You're totally right.
Okay, so I want to introduce another topic based on a conversation I heard that I think you all have good opinions on. I learned recently that depending on who is elected, they must appoint a commissioner to the SEC in their party. If Donald Trump is elected, he can replace Gary Gensler with Hester or with Mark, I can't think of his last name. If Kamala Harris is elected, Hester cannot become the chair of the SEC, which personally is a little sad for me. I'm curious to know what you all think about on the Bitcoin stage. Donald Trump said, "I will fire Gary Gensler." I think pretty much across the board, he's an unpopular opinion. He probably will be replaced. Kamala will probably want fresh blood if it's her, and that person serves at the leisure of the president. So it's within their purview to appoint someone new.
Kinda.
Do you all think? Kinda, yes. Do you all think it is a guarantee that we will lose Gensler? And if we do, who do you think is likely to replace him? And is that even a helpful talking point? Does it even matter? Is like my ultimate question. I'd love to know what you all think, because I think just based on the response to Trump's speech, Will, you were in the room, right?
I had to leave, so I was on my way to the airport to get out of there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then I caught it briefly, and my observation was that, people were pretty happy, kind of giving him middling responses throughout his speech. But when he said the Gensler bit, the room erupted. Like that's the number one thing crypto people seem to agree on, is we got to get Gary Gensler out. But what do you guys think about that?
Do you want me to walk through how the SEC commission is selected and how?
Yes, that would be wonderful for our audience.
That would be really helpful, because I have a bad feeling that a lot of people think the president can just show up and fire the SEC commissioner.
Correct.
The chair with nothing else happening. Like, that's not how it works. But please help us fill it in the blanks.
Terrifyingly, the president could, disband the SEC on day one, but that's a different issue. So there are 5 commissioners of the SEC. They are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So that's the same process that we see for major regulatory bodies. It's basically the same process that you would see for like the Supreme Court, which just tends to get more media coverage. No more than 3 members of that 5-member panel can be of the same party. So, with a Democratic president, it stands to reason that you would have 3 members of the Democratic Party, 2 members of the Republican Party. And then the chairman is appointed in the same way by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So again, to William's point on checks and balances, there are checks and balances here, depending on the makeup of the Senate at any given point in time. Those things may move slower or faster. Historically speaking, these are all people who are extremely well-versed in their space. They have spent their entire careers focused in this area, kind of moving on to this point of presiding over the regulation. So historically, a president would pick very well accomplished individuals and they would move through the process seamlessly. So, that's all to say, I know crypto hates Gary Gensler. It is still a 5-person body that debates and discusses and chooses, what to do. And then under that 5-person body, under those, 5 commissioners, you have additional people who, again, have spent their entire careers investigating, looking at the legality, writing white papers on, these different legal issues, and then deciding, what areas to focus on and to bring cases against. So it's no one individual, and it's not as simple as just, new president, new body. I think that kind of regardless, certain people would be involved just because of, their just great history and extensive knowledge of the space. So Gary's getting old, but, Hester will probably be around.
Yeah. No, Glenn, first of all, welcome up. Good to see you. Good to have you.
Good morning. Good morning.
So just for, I guess, a little bit of extra context here too, there is a vehicle by which the president can fire the chair of the SEC. It's just not that easy. There's all sorts of different roles and different types of positions that somebody can fill in government. There's, of course, a gajillion just regular employees. There's political appointees, and then there's independent positions, more like this one, where, of course, there is a vehicle to get rid of them if there's cause, but there has to be cause. And again, I want it to be abundantly clear that I'm not saying I agree and that I love Gary Gensler and I want him to stay in his job by no stretch. But unfortunately, massive policy disagreement is not cause to fire someone like the chair of the SEC. And so it is not that simple.
Boo!
And let me just add that is actually being litigated in Florida right now. We are in a position where the governor removed a twice elected official based on political disagreements. The court, the lower court ruled that you can't do that. It is in the appeals process. It will continue to be appealed, and it may in fact go to the Supreme Court. The 11th Circuit is just painfully slow, but we are actually litigating over that currently in Florida. But yes, I mean, to Alex's point, it's not just one person making these decisions. It is a body. They are relying on the expertise of the individuals who, work under them as well. But because of the process of nominating and then the Senate confirming, it's not like a press secretary. You can't just fire the person at will.
That's a high. I know we all wish we could. I mean, I'm with you, Evan. I think on my Christmas crypto list would be Hester Pierce, or even if it's somebody on the dim side who's Hester-like, right? I mean, I just think it's time. Going back to Will's point earlier about things kind of being able to move slow for the safety and the betterment of the country, I agree. It's just that when we get into these situations where we take so long, we allow other countries to try to, gain a foothold on the space. And we all know what happens when that happens. You lose. You're no longer the authority figure. You're now playing catch up. You're no longer on offense. You're now on defense. And in crypto, with any other asset class or anything in general, if it moves slow, that might be okay. With crypto, you can't have that. Like, I think there's something to be said about moving fast, not being afraid to break things. Alex, to your point earlier, making sure whatever changes you need to make, it's fluid. So in case you do run into a situation like, okay, that didn't work, let's change it, and having people be like, okay, cool, we understand that didn't work, and we understand why we need to change it. But what we have here in this country is just, it's stonewalling at its finest. There's little to no progression. If you've been in the space as long as I have, for 7 years, some of us have been asking for regulation because we know what kind of benefit that can add to the space. What we have here is just an inability to change or to move on things for a number of reasons. Maybe we don't want the other political party to get the credit, which I think is total BS. It's like, if you're for the betterment of the country, it shouldn't matter who gets the credit as long as the nation is moving forward as a whole. We just don't have
Amen.
Unfortunately, politics.
Unfortunately, politics, right? Unfortunately, politics. And I feel like that's going to be the great undoing, not just in crypto, but with a lot of different things. It's like, listen, get it done, because we need to be the champions in the space. We need to be the leaders in the space. If not the leader, like top 2, definitely not top 3, in my opinion.
The one nice thing is that America has such great weight, financially speaking especially, that we can take our time, and then once we finally place ourselves in the arena of crypto, we have now probably intentionally crushed all of the attention of the other countries who were there first with our immeasurable weight in financial prowess and the amount of money that we have. So that's one good thing. But yeah, totally. If we could just move faster and be on offense instead of defense, which I think is the perfect analogy there, and be the ones really championing instead of, Southeast Asia, on so many fronts, that would be phenomenal. It'd be so much better.
There's just a singular trait that everyone who is appointed to or elected to any government or regulatory position ever really needs to possess, and it's in the minority, exactly like Glenn said, because politics, which is just the ability and the willingness to change your mind when presented with new information, even if it means that you are now admitting that you were wrong or you made a mistake. And that's the fundamental issue with Gary. Not that he has policies that I personally disagree with, but the fact that he has been repeatedly presented with conflicting information that is contrary to the way that he has conducted the agency. And he refuses to budge. He refuses to admit that, like, yikes, fucked up, time to adjust, which is okay. Like, I don't think that a lot of people in positions of power understand the amount of grace that would be afforded to someone who, like, possesses humility and admits that they screwed up and then can move on. I mean, look at how we treat a politician when they, like, admit fault for something, and go on, or a celebrity who just, like, leans in. You know who's a great example? Sketch, the streamer.
I was just thinking that. Yes. Yeah.
Like, you know how many celebrity scandals, and he's a bad example because his scandal is so stupid and not a real scandal and really just a byproduct of bigotry. However, all he did was show up and be like, yep, that was me, my bad, sorry. And everyone's like, it's okay. And then we're done. But he could have argued it. And I don't know why a Twitch streamer has, constantly more integrity than every political figure in this country, but it's the sad reality. So that's really it. I don't care who gets
the Twitch streamer who can think of some recent headlines.
Yes, that is absolutely true. It's just weird that that's not like a benchmark of, for example, the Senate approval process. Being able to hold up an example of humility in that person's career. That's never it. It's always just political ping pong, and that's a real problem.
It's tough too, because the incentive in those spaces is to tear other people down and to be adversarial. And when you build your whole platform off of, like, exposing other people for being wrong, then the second you do something wrong, everyone will come after you. We see it all the time on TikTok. I mean, there are entire creators whose whole platform is exposing one person or canceling one person. And the second they screw up, their audience just eats them alive, So it's somewhat the nature of the thing. Like, the political system is structured and incentivized to be adversarial. It's unhelpful to the max.
Well, and I think part of that is the fact that we have a two-party system. We have a very binary approach in the U.S., like right or wrong, you're with me or you're against me. Democrat, Republican. I mean, we see how down ballot races are decided heavily based on party affiliation and turnout, just because, we have a lot, I think most individuals, most humans have a lot more in common with what they want and what they're looking for. And yet when push comes to shove, because of the way, these two private clubs have just held on to power, we don't have a lot of room for nuance. It's a very binary system, and it's a very binary society because of it.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. If we had more parties, it'd be so much better.
And also,
The
if we had more
inability-
parties, everyone loves a festive get together.
Yeah, well, to be clear, we do have a lot of parties. We just, like you said, Jessica, the inability to recognize and work with nuance is a literal epidemic that just usually leads to unhelpful combats of whataboutism that lead nowhere. And it's like you said, I think the biggest rifts, especially politically, between people are often able to be boiled down to one singular, small, almost inconsequential issue that has either been A, blown out of proportion, B, misrepresented, or C, just comes from good old-fashioned misinformation or a lack of reasonable education. And fear sells, so why not make everything scary?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Glenn, I think you missed the conversation earlier. It was just a brief conversation about someone in the comments had mentioned a crypto exchange commission rather than the SEC, and we briefly talked about just kind of the need to have a standalone organization.
Do you know what's funny about that? Is I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you guys talk as I'm out cutting my grass, and it's already 90 degrees out here, FML. And I had the exact same thought. I said, oh my God, you could totally have a different branch, call it the cryptocurrency administration, or call it whatever you want to call it, right? And then as soon as I had that thought, my mind immediately went to people saying, oh, well, now you got more big government spending. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Even if you didn't have another establishment, even if it was just the SEC or the CFTC, you still have to bring more people on board to go through the paperwork, to go through the cases. So either way, you're going to be spending money on things like salary, right? So if that's the case, yeah, just go ahead and bring on a brand new administration or a brand new entity. Let them have domain over cryptocurrency, and let's light this candle.
I think the conversation there, and like where a lot of people get stuck, is by allowing things to occur at the federal level, which does require some amount of spend, we're actually more efficient and utilizing a smaller government model. By pushing things down to the state level or the kind of no regulation, we're in an inefficient model to allow for individuals to make their own decisions. So I think that there's this constant kind of, and the left doesn't do a good job switching that rhetoric up, that everything costs money. So do you want a sandbox, a federal sandbox that is a far more efficient model that will allow individuals, regardless of where they are, to make their own decisions? Or do you want this nitpicky, state by state, inefficient system in which, you're, instead of scaling, which, private equity does very, very well, instead of embracing that scaling, we're ignoring the efficiency and, kind of removing the individual's opportunity to do what they want to do.
It's like it would be really cool if we allowed ourselves to live in the hypothetical as a government for a minute and just sort of dreamed up the ideal scenario and then just walked it backwards to figure out, okay, well, what would theoretically then need to happen in order for XYZ to come to fruition? Because I could daydream up a process, right? I mean, there's a congressional committee, I can't remember the name of it, but in the House of Representatives that specifically governs digital asset consumer protection. There are a number of Congress people who serve on that committee right now, and it never sees the light of day. I never see people talk about it. But if you search for it, it's easy to find, right? There's a ton of congressional subcommittees. See you, Will.
You guys, I gotta run.
And you could totally dream up a scenario in which a congressional subcommittee could become a new regulatory agency. And to Glenn's point, which is a phenomenal one, the immediate piece of pushback that you would probably run into is government spending, which is such bullshit, because the only time questioning government spending ever comes into the conversation is when it's being done on something that whoever raises the alarm happens to disagree with. Because I can tell you right now, from years and years and years of personal experience, everyone should be upset. Every single person, including those who want the United States to remain the militaristic superpower, everyone should be upset about the amount of money that gets spent on defense. And we could pretty much fund anything we wanted if we just worked a little harder on cleaning that up. But like, even me, even little old me, in a fringe division of the fringest branch of the military, got to the end of every year and had my shop chief come up to me and say, look, we've got X dollars, spend it. And we would just make shit up to make sure that the budget remained in place for the next year in case something came up. And that is a theme all over the place. So, you know, I could want the military to stay funded. Of course, I want my friends that are still there putting their life on the line every day to have good equipment, obviously. However, I also know we waste a ton of money. So we could absolutely find the money to do something meaningful if we wanted to. And there are so many examples in government of being allowed to spend some money at some point to save more money or make people's lives better. Or in this case, theoretically again, enrich the country by bringing a new market for jobs and employment opportunities and education and all sorts of stuff to this country, importing more talent from overseas who are currently over there because they feel like they can't work or innovate in Web3 in the United States. Like, all of these things are good, and they might involve some spending, but that is definitely a hurdle we would need to get over, which is really unfortunate. A good example of that red tape and that divide that comes from a pulpit of misinformation.
I was gonna say, to your point, man, it's like, so number one, the overspending that you're saying happens in the military 100%. It also happens in corporate America, people just spending money to hold on to their budgets. The other thing that I would say is, again, to your point, whenever somebody's got to get whacked, we never ask where that money's coming from. Shit just gets handled, right? Exactly. So it's like, if we got money for that, we've got money for spinning up a new agency that could probably help us get a better grasp on the realm that we're trying to navigate here today. I agree with you 100%.
I think people would be really surprised at how little money it could take to spin up a new regulatory agency, especially if, for example, it was born out of an existing congressional subcommittee that already has a bunch of people who have been eating, sleeping, breathing, you know, theoretical policy around that issue for years now. So take this congressional subcommittee about digital assets and just ask them, like, okay, you guys have interviewed people. You already have probably a pretty good list of decent educators or problems that you've observed or whatever. We already have an agenda. We literally just need to staff this thing. And who cares, dude? Maybe it's time to embrace the idea of a remote government agency. Like, there's no need. You could shoestring this thing and actually get something done if we were just willing to. There you go, Jillian. That's a great example. We just have to be willing to, like, take a stab, and if it doesn't work out, adjust. You know, but like, that's just so far out of the question. Sometimes it's a little ridiculous.
I agree. Just be fluid, right? Because I mean, think about it. So this industry didn't even exist 20 years ago. So of course there's going to be hiccups along the way, problems that people have to be able to navigate on the fly. So to think, really to expect anything contrary, in my opinion, would just be ridiculous. Like, you're going to break things. Like, I highly doubt when the SEC was formulated way back when, they got everything right out of the gate. Like, that doesn't happen anywhere. So we shouldn't even expect it to happen, like I said, in our arena.
No, you're right. It's totally silly to assume perfection right out of the gate. But that's kind of one of those things, you know, I mean, there's so many other issues that the country faces that we run into that exact thing. You could throw a dart at the board of, you know, issues facing the U.S. and pick any single one of them. And we've kind of reached this point where, like, we don't want to progress on anything because of the fear that it won't be perfect, which is just such a silly thing to be worried about.
Exactly. You know, I'm kind of paying attention to the comments here, and I think it was what's going on, property lawyer. I think it was Philly Boy who might have been talking about UFOs, and that just kind of got me thinking about what's the new agency, Space Force? Like, how much did it cost
Yeah.
to really get those guys spun up? And do you really think you'd need
So
a
much
half
money.
of, you know what I mean? Like, they're dealing with something that's significantly more, I guess, obtuse. And we're talking about cryptocurrency here, right? It's not too far off from what we're already been dealing with the SEC or the CFTC. So again, take a look at what it costs to spin up the Space Force and figure, I don't know, half, maybe 60% of that.
It
Well,
would
it's
be
just-
great to start with just enough employees to staff a Starbucks at 4 p.m. Like,
there
we
you
could
go.
do a lot of damage with that. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. The other thing
The-
I want
the-
to mention,
The
I was gonna say
conversation
the-
started with exactly that, Glenn. It was Space Force. Where crypto was like, we have Space Force. Why not crypto Space Force? The motto could be to the moon.
to the moon, right? And I'm glad we were able to bring that full circle.
To answer the question, the 2024 budgetary request for Space Force was $30 billion.
Come on now. Come on.
Which,
And that's a way
which
more
fun-
divisive issue.
Which, fun fact, doesn't really contain much in its purview that couldn't be handled by NASA and the Air Force at the same time. And it is like 3 times that of the Coast Guard, which is the most thinly spread branch of the military by far. Again, speaking from a decade of personal experience, it's hilarious how slanted that was and how few times I've heard anyone question why we are spending so much money on an agency that spends a lot of its time playing Xbox on duty.
Oh my God. Okay, so somebody spin up the Pump.Fund real quick. The ticker is Space Force. The market cap target is 30 billion. It's going to the moon eventually. Maybe Mars, you know. Oh my gosh. The thing about regulation and agencies too is, like, in the meantime, I feel good at least. We have, by the numbers, a significant force lobbying our government, and I'm sure the same is true around the world where innovations are, happening less unhindered right now, to bring in more helpful crypto legislation. And I would say, say what you will about A16Z or Coinbase as centralized companies with a lot of power. I do think that the way they are representing our space to people who have policy-making power is helpful. And I'm not sure if what they're advocating for, I haven't heard a lot of those agencies talk about, I haven't heard Coinbase or A16Z talk about creating a new agency as much as I have heard them talk about educating the people in power now. They're looking at levers. What's the lever that we can pull to get the greatest impact? And I know they spend a lot of time in meetings on Capitol Hill. I know they're meeting with Congress people and representatives at every level. So my kind of, like, if I was a betting guy, putting Polymarket on it, I really do think we're going to get some champions in Congress, even if they're paid for. And then I think probably what is going to happen is those people will start to move away from this, like, regulation by, lawsuit towards something that is more helpful within the status quo current system. The SEC, get a better commissioner, more crypto friendly, and then maybe eventually we can get that. I think it goes back to what you said, Alex. There's so much red tape. I don't know what it takes to create a new government agency, but I've got to imagine it's a process. When people want to move it, they do. But right now, even though it's a nonpartisan issue, crypto remains divisive.
So, yes, but again, to Glenn's point, the Space Force was essentially started and given a $centi-billion budget from day one by executive order. So it can be done. It's not that hard.
It can absolutely be done. I think, some of the issue is again, going back to the binary, those politicians who have co-opted the conversation or, the talking points for it, making it unpopular on the other side. And again, there are people who, on both sides, who are having very reasonable conversations about it. And there are people who are, focused on the innovation. But, right now it is a very partisan topic, largely because the talking points have been co-opted by people who don't understand them, don't care to understand them, and just want to use them as, political fodder.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that'll change though. I see Congress people being crypto pilled all the time, and I think mostly it's a gap in education and understanding. When conservative people understand what it can do for freedom, limited government, and when very liberal people understand what it can do to increase representation and access, then mostly they say, "Oh, I get it." Which is why we have to keep having conversations like this one, and why we got to get the GoFundMe to send Alex with his little briefcase to Washington. When Alex Popovich before Congress to testify?
No briefcase, just this.
Just
No briefcase, just vibes.
No briefcase, just vibes.
Evan, I love you, brother. What you said about, I think it's just once they have a certain, level of comprehension with it. I'm like, I love this guy. I feel like once the check clears and they're like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, crypto's good. We should definitely do that.
Yeah, you're not wrong, man. You're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong at all. So usually we start winding the show down around this time. I want to just say as a matter of housekeeping. First of all, Glenn, if you got another minute, I do want to hear. We've talked a little about the conference. I would love to hear. I know you've been sharing them on your channel. Some of the TLDR takeaways from the conference and what you're looking at on the future based on what you saw there. Jessica, I'd love for you to give, a last thought, good joke, word of wisdom too. I'm going to hand it over to Alex to do that. But I want to say to everyone in the comments, if you've got a question, suggestion, good joke, word of wisdom, now's the time to throw it in. If we don't get to it, don't fret, because we're here Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. We do this always. And the place the conversation lives after the show is offline is the Discord server. It's totally free to join, jump in there, hang out with people, ask your questions, share what you know. The best way to learn crypto or anything is to join a community of people who are also curious about it, because it accelerates your learning journey. There are plenty of communities out there, lots of great ones to join. All the people you see come through on the show are here to help you learn this stuff. No such thing as a dumb question. You can find the link to join that Discord community at theriseupmorningshow.com. We've got links to our YouTube channel where all these streams go up. We've got links to our free newsletter where we send you the best, briefest bullet points and links from the show. So you don't have to tune in all the time if you can't, who's got 12 hours to live stream every week? Apparently we do, but you might not. That's what the newsletter's for. It's all there for you at theriseupmorningshow.com. And the last thing I'll say as part of my commercial is make sure you follow these folks here, because these are our only accounts, and we will never, ever message you offering to help you with your trading. What's up, bro? How's your trading going? Are you feeling profitable in the markets? None of that
How are
is
the markets
us.
treating you, Evan?
How are the markets treating you? Exactly, right? Would you like to earn passive income? All those things, they're scams. If you want to get 10,000 followers quickly, the best thing to do is join a Crypto Live with Calvin Hill, and you will get 10,000 fake Calvin Hill accounts, 10,000 fake Alex Popovich accounts.
100%.
We are one of a kind, just like you. These are our only accounts, so follow us and be skeptical. Gotta stay wary.
I do want to say just real quickly,
Yeah.
Glenn, your fake followers are the stingiest ones out of all of them.
Wait.
The number of like fake everyone else's compared to the number of Glens that I get, it's a massive discrepancy. And I've been meaning to ask you about that. Why don't your fake followers like me, Glenn?
Listen, I have no control over that. People will, hey, Glenn, I saw this video of you, but the account doesn't look right. Here's the name. Go check it out. And I'll take a look at it. And they just keep spinning these damn things up. It got so good. Someone sent me an account that was a fake account of mine. I went to go check it out, and nothing came up. So I'm like, wait, the fake account blocked me, but it's pulling my videos from a different account. It's
Dude,
wild.
what won't they do? I saw one of Blockchain Boy where somebody had AI deep faked him. And
Yeah.
it was his voice and his body, and it was not his account. And I was like, these guys are they're so ruthless, man. They're so
Yeah, that's
ruthless.
going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem.
He's not the only one. I've seen a couple more creators get AI deepfaked popping up since then. Although, Evan, I thought of you yesterday because usually after the live is over, I get a few scammers that are always the same opening line, right? Like, how would you like to improve the quality of your live broadcast? And I got one yesterday that was just, brother, are you okay? And I was just like, all right, first of all, valid question. I don't know what I was yelling about when you sent me that DM. That's fair.
Everybody always wants to know where's security, but nobody ever asks how they are.
I do have to run. I have to take the kid to the doctor for an appointment here. But I wanted to give one quick shout out because in my never-ending quest to leave the crypto echo chamber, I have an example of a very good way that you can start to do that. So for those of you who don't know, Molly White is a crypto commentator who runs a blog. Well, she runs several called Web3 is Going Great. And she mostly just points out problems and gives very detailed analysis of issues that plague Web3 and nefarity and malice.
It's a great read.
She is great. Fun fact, I went to undergrad with her. She is interviewing Lynn Alden today in a few hours. Lynn Alden being a prominent figure in the Bitcoin community, and they connected on Twitter because Molly was writing something about the lack of representation for women at the Bitcoin conference, and I think her kind of funny example was the number of Matts that were speaking at the conference compared. It was like there are more Matts than there are women at the Bitcoin conference or something.
Oh, no.
And so Lynn and her started talking, and anyway, it was recommended that Molly interview her. And so they are, I can put the link when I find it here. Molly just texted our group chat and said that she's going to be interviewing her today in a few hours. So I will get the link and I'll share it in Discord. And then we will absolutely cover it. Molly is someone I would love to get on the show. I think I just need to talk to her a little bit more because, of course, she is very used to being harassed and yelled at and targeted by people in crypto rather than people looking to embrace an alternative perspective. So I will keep you guys posted, but I'm sure that it will be findable if you follow her or look her up on Twitter. And I can put her handle right down here in the comments. This is from Molly's Twitter account, and I'm sure everything will be there.
Does she have a TikTok, Alex?
Not that I know of.
Good to know. Well then, man, thank you for another great week on the show. I'm going to let you go to the doctor. We'll look forward to an update, and we'll catch you in the Discord, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So I just put her handle down here in the chat. That's Molly 0, the number 0x, and then 3 Fs. 0xFFF. Or if you just look up Molly White, Web3 is Going Great, on Google, you will find her. She is not hard to find. She had some good stuff, Evan. I'm very curious to talk to her more about calling into question the integrity of contributions made to the Stand with Crypto PAC. Sorry, they're not a PAC. To the Stand with Crypto organization, and then their subsequent contributions from Coinbase as an entity to the PAC called, holy shit, what is it called? What's the huge
The big one, the big crypto PAC. I don't remember what it's called. It's big.
Anyway, Coinbase has donated tens of millions of dollars to them, and it looks like they may have done it within a window where contribution to a PAC would have been illegal. Not that they'd be the only ones to have ever done that, but it is a problem. So curious about that. She's got some literature about that and kind of a breakdown. But anyway, good to see you guys. Jessica, thanks for hopping up. Glenn, good to chat as always. And I will see you guys. I'll see you guys
next time. Okay, Jessica, Glenn, do you have a final thought? Good joke, word of wisdom, question, suggestion for us before we ride our ponies off into the sunset for the weekend?
Yeah, I'm just kind of touch base here just regarding the conference. I mean, my huge takeaway for the conference was if you haven't gone to one, you definitely need to go because there are things that are happening. The ground is starting to shake underneath our feet, and people need to be aware of that. A lot of the stuff that comes to that conference, what I've noticed, actually goes unknown. And just to kind of touch on the political sphere here for a second, if I'm being completely objective and honest with you guys, there are candidates in this space who seem to be pro-crypto. And if I'm being honest with you, the one who seems to understand it a lot better is probably not the most popular one. That was my big takeaway.
Let me invite you to elaborate on that, because I heard you in your live say, I know you're talking about the distinction between Donald Trump and RFK. And I know you're not endorsing any candidates necessarily, but what you said about the difference listening to them, I think, don't let me put words in your mouth, you said that maybe RFK, it was more like listening to one of us who uses crypto every day talk about the struggles and opportunities and challenges. With Donald Trump,
No.
it was more like somebody who just was reading it.
That's exactly right. Like when you listen to RFK talk about his journey with Bitcoin, what you feel like, oh, this is a guy who could be at his home right now, at his desk with the trading view chart up right now, right? Like he probably has some ordinals, was probably messing around with the Unisats wallet before it became popular. Like he, to me, comes off very much as a practitioner of the technology. Whereas when you listen to Donald Trump, if I'm being honest, he's just kind of like he's got a partner or maybe his kid's into it, but he's not really a practitioner, right? Someone just kind of gave him the cues and he's reading from it. And don't get me wrong, like both would be phenomenal for the space, but in terms of like who do you really want in your corner, I want someone who really understands it. And when I listen to RFK talk, man, the level of competency that he has, I have not heard from a politician, not even from Cynthia Loomis, and that is saying a lot.
Yeah.
That is saying a lot, because if it's three people I feel really get this, I'm going to say it's Cynthia, I'm going to say it's Hester Pierce, and I'm going to say it's RFK. Like I know there's more people, right? But just listening to the people over the last 6 months to a year, maybe even a year and a half, who I really feel understand the space is probably those three.
Excellent. Excellent. So look for leaders who understand from experience and support them. Or hold others to that standard.
Or hold others to the standard, because my thing is when Trump was giving his speech and everyone's like, yeah, look, fire Gary Gensler, yeah, he sucks, we hate him. And then he goes on to say things like, Trump at the end of his speech, he's like, we're going to protect your crypto, we're going to make it great again, and whatever else that you're playing with. I'm like, ooh, you did not use that verbiage. The people are playing. No, people are coming to this space because for them, this represents a benefit, a change, an opportunity, a way to completely change their system, a way to completely do something that has never been done before and just add their own touch to the ecosphere, right? And when he ended with that, I said, I wonder how many people are going to catch on to that. And I haven't really heard too many people making a big stink about it. So maybe a lot of people are just kind of enamored that it was Trump there. And, sometimes we don't really pay attention to everything that's being said. But when he said that, I kind of cringed a little bit. I did.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the update, man. And looking forward to having you around again. Mow that lawn. And thank you for hanging out with us, brother. I appreciate
Sure, guys. I'll be around. Thanks for having me up.
Jessica, what about you? You got a final thought as we ride our dogs and ponies into the sunset?
I would just encourage everyone to always take a step back, look at, different angles, different perspectives. If you're, in a group where you feel like you're learning a lot, you should still be constantly questioning where that information is coming from, especially if you're readily agreeing with it. Just kind of always have that critical thinking hat on. And I would encourage people to, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're only looking at the space through the lens of making money and kind of that need, I don't think that you're ever able to see the big picture. So I would encourage everyone to, be measured in their approach to everything. There's a lot of propaganda out there, and a lot of times that propaganda directly benefits the individual who is sharing it. So whether they're making money on it or, they're involved in a project, I think now and in the next 100 days more than ever, critical thinking is key.
Excellent. Very well said. Very well said. That's one of my
Thanks for
favorite sort of
having me.
proverbs. Thank you so much for coming up. You're welcome anytime, and I hope we get to see you again. Are you, you said you're not creating as much content these days. Where is this the best place for people to connect with you and follow your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not putting much out there. I will say that, the space, at least on TikTok, changed a lot. When my other account was banned, I just kind of decided to hang it up there. I'm fortunate to have a network of very, very cerebral, technical resources to discuss things with that I enjoy greatly. But yeah, follow for cat updates as Adam of the Hand for
Large cat
very
updates.
irreverent videos starring the cat, large cat updates. But I don't plan on creating content anytime soon in the crypto space. I do, I enjoy these conversations with measured, nuanced individuals such as yourselves, but the influencer space in general has become a very toxic place. And I do lurk, and I occasionally, will pop on to one of these and listen, but I'm not going to be putting out any videos or anything.
Well, I respect that, and I'm honored that you chose to come up and share, and I would welcome you to come back and share here anytime you have something that you'd like to share. I have one other thought for you, which is if you're not going to launch and pump the meme coin cat with shirt, at the very least, you should write the book, The Cat in the Shirt, because I think it's a sleeper hit.
In shirt.
Okay, so my last thought, my final thought is to echo what you said, that it is important to remember you are telling a story with everything you say, everything you don't say, everything you invest in, everything you choose to amplify, and everything you ignore. The influencer space is one example. The government space is another. That it is up to all of us to tell a better story if we want a better story to be told. You don't have to be a person in the box. You can choose to support people in the box whose voices add value. You don't have to be a presidential candidate, but you can vote. It's up to all of us, and you can do it too. So, my friends, thank you for a great week. You're the best part of the Rise Up Morning Show. You can find all our links at theriseupmorningshow.com, and we will be back here live Monday at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12 p.m. UTC. Everybody have a great weekend. Be safe. And until next time, my friends, rise up.